Hi friends! Today's video is a little bit more exciting. I've just released a PDF sewing pattern that is available on my website for $3 a pop. And it's for these super cute bloomers. This pattern is really near and dear to my heart. I've been using it for years. It's a really good option for if you're running a theater company and you need some modesty shorts to go under skirts. It's a really great option if you're in the Lolita community. If you're an OG, you might be able to use the queen length depending on what your style is exactly. And I think they're really fun. They're great for history bounding, they're great for lounging around the house. There's certain K styles that I think they would work well in. They're really great. This video is going to be a step-by-step tutorial, but there's also a written tutorial on my website as well, and that has pictures. I'm going to walk you through the two different lengths of bloomer and the two different waistband insertion methods. And on the green bloomers, I'm going to walk you through how to do the heart pockets and the bum ruffles. Because, let's be honest, those are some of the more fun elements. I'm also going to walk you through how to do the Woah bows and the side bows. And yes, the side bows are entirely a pun. You're welcome. It's available in 5 sizes: extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. They're very, very fluffy. So if you're looking for a minimal bloomer pattern, look elsewhere, because these are full poof. Anyways, let's sew some bloomers. After trimming each page so that the bottom margin and the left side margin have been trimmed off, you're going to line up your pattern pages 1 through 5 in 4 rows. I like to only pin together the pieces that I know are connected and cut them out as I go, because otherwise you're going to wind up with a huge piece of paper that is a pain to maneuver. Zelinka! Zelinka, you're in the shot! You need to move! Once all your pieces are cut out, you should have your front panel, your back panel, your leg ruffle, your leg casing, your side bow, your bow ribbon, your Woah bow, your Woah tails, your heart pocket, and your bum ruffle, which is a separate PDF print file. The queen length bloomers are the longer cut of bloomer. So to cut those out, you're just going to line your pattern up on your fabric. I'm using a bunch of upcycled pillowcases, so I have to finagle a little bit. And you're going to cut those out at the length. And you're going to cut those out at the longest length on the bottom hem. Make sure that you line up your grain line. For my queen length bloomers, I'm going to be doing the drawstring insertion method, so I'm also cutting out some leg casings, as well as some leg ruffles. I wanted these ruffles to be extra ruffly, so for each leg I cut out 1 full ruffle on fold and 1 extra panel cut not on fold, and I sewed those to make 1 continuous ruffle, but I'll talk more about that later. If you want to cut out cloud length bloomers, what you're going to do is cut off along this dotted line to shorten your pattern. All of the pattern lines are already adjusted to make sure that they'll line up perfectly when you cut along this line. Cut out 2 of your front and back panels in pieces 1 and 2, as well as cutting out your leg ruffle. I'm cutting my fabric out on fold so that I only have to cut it once, but you will have to cut the leg ruffle twice. I'm also going to be cutting out the little heart pockets as well. For my green cloud length bloomers, I wanted to demo the bum ruffles. To cut out the bum ruffles, line up the top edge on the fold where the arrows are pointing to. Cut out the longest length first, and then fold along the tier 3 line. Cut that out and then fold along the next line. Each ruffle will get progressively shorter. By the end of it, you should have 4 bum ruffles in varying lengths. When cutting out the Woah bow and side bows, I recommend that you use your brain, and don't cut them out in a silky, ridiculous black satin fabric. On a more practical note, you're going to cut out 2 of the Woah bow tails on the fold. You'll also cut out 2 of the Woah bow panels. And for the side bows, you will cut out 4. 2 panels for each bow. You will also want to cut out 3 of the bow ribbons. For this pattern, I also decided to cut out a longer leg ruffle in my contrasting fabric. Take your bum ruffle tiers and press them with your iron. Fold them in by roughly 5/8 of an inch and press them well. Then do this a second time. Then you're going to take this over to your machine and stitch down the edging. Make sure that you do it on the sides as well, and make sure that your top stitching is nice and even as possible. Then take your machines and set the stitches to the longest stitch you have, and sew 2 lines along the top edge of the ruffle. Now all of your tiers should have a hem and some gathering stitches along the top. Make sure that you sew the back panel before continuing. Pin down your ruffles after gathering them, and make sure that your gathers are as even as possible. You can mark the lines on your pattern pieces to have a guide for where to pin them. Stitch in between the 2 lines of gathering stitches, remembering to backstitch. I like to leave a little bit of a gap and pin my ruffles down so that they don't get in the way of my seams. To assemble your cloud length bloomers, first stitch along the crotch seams in the front and the back. Then you're going to clip those seams, being careful not to clip any stitches accidentally. And then you're going to iron all of your seams as flat as possible. If you would like to add bum ruffles, now is the time that you would. Pin your side seams closed and stitch 5/8 of an inch away from the seam, remembering to backstitch. The only difference between queen length and cloud length is that if you're sewing queen length, all of your seams will be roughly 1 inch longer. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. To assemble a 2-tiered leg ruffle, make sure that you have 2 tiers of fabric, one in the shorter length and one in the longer length. Then you're going to press a hem into each of these lengths of fabric. Stitch that hem down, and then pin your leg ruffles to the bottom leg opening. You're going to want to pin the shorter ruffle down first, and then the longer ruffle. Sew this seam with a 5/8 seam allowance, and possibly zigzag or overlock over the raw edge to protect it. And then all you have to do is sew up the crotch. For the gathered ruffle, what you're going to do is cut out 1 tier on the fold, and then using your same pattern, cut out 1 piece that is not on the fold. This will give you a ruffle that is 1.5 times longer than your leg opening. For my ruffle, I cut out the longest tier length and then I folded it in half. This was to avoid doing a hem. I sewed 2 stitches along the top edge of my ribbon so that I could gather it, as you see here. This is pretty standard ruffling business. And then, just like with my 2-tiered ruffle, I lined my ruffle up along the edge of my leg hole, and I stitched it down with a 5/8 of an inch seam. The first step in inserting a drawstring waistband is to put in your eyelets. I chose to do them by machine because this would save time. However, hand-bound eyelets are a very nice touch. Fold along the top line of your waistband and then fold your raw edge under by 5/8 of an inch. Press this really well. Then you're going to take your work over to your machine. Stitch down the raw edge first, and then sew along your marked lines to create a channel for your drawstring. Next, cut a piece of ribbon that is the length of your channel plus 2 inches. You're going to thread this through your channel using a bodkin or a safety pin. And then your waistband is done. For an elastic waistband, fold the raw edge of your fabric under by 5/8 of an inch, and iron this line very well. Then you're going to fold along the top line of the marked waistband lines on your pattern. You're going to sew along the marked lines of your pattern, remembering to leave a gap on the side so that you can thread your elastic through these holes. With either a bodkin or a safety pin, take a length of elastic that measures the circumference of your waist around plus 1 inch, and thread that through each one of these little channels that you've just created. Once every channel has elastic inside of it, you're going to stitch the elastic shut. Try to ensure that there are no twists in the elastic. Then you're going to stitch each channel closed, and then your elastic waistband is done. To finish your legs with elastic, measure a length of elastic that is the circumference of your upper thigh. Mark the midpoints in between the seams and divide your elastic into fourths. Pin each quarter mark on one of the midpoints or on one of the seams. This will distribute the stretch of the elastic evenly along the edge of the leg. For a drawstring finish on your leg holes, you're going to start with your eyelets again. Once again, I did a machine stitch, but you don't have to. I would highly recommend doing a hand-bound one if you have the time, that is. Next, you're going to take your pattern piece that is the leg channels, and you're going to fold in each edge by like roughly 5/8 of an inch. I'm using a bias tape maker because it made things a lot faster. Next, you're going to line this up along the bottom edge of your bloomers. You'll want to use a ton of pins for this. Stitch down along the edge, and then your channel is done, and all that's left to do is cut 2 lengths of ribbon, just a little bit longer than the length from the edge of the seam to the eyelets. Thread this through with a bodkin, and then you're going to stay stitch it before closing up your crotch seam. To assemble the woah bows, take each of your woah bows or side bow panel and line them together right sides facing in. Remember to leave a little 1-inch gap so that you can turn them all right sides out. For your bow ribbons, you're just going to sew them in a little tube with right sides facing in, and then turn that tube right side out. For the bow base and the bow tails, you're going to sew 1/8 of an inch along the edge of each piece, remembering to leave that little 1-inch gap so you can turn it right sides together. Really take your time and make sure that you're putting your needle down in the correct place. Normally I would tell you to clip your corners, but because I'm using cheap poly satin, I'm not going to do that because it would weaken the fabric too much. Next, turn all of your plackets inside out using a chopstick to make your corners as pointy as you could possibly get them. Turn your woah bow ribbons inside out as well. Give everything a good press before continuing. Mark the midpoint on the woah bow base and the woah bow tails and make sure that the midpoints are lined up. Then do a running stitch along the midpoint and scrunch them together. Make a stay stitch before continuing, and then you're going to attach the woah bow ribbon. Wrap this around the middle, making sure that the front lays as nicely as possible, and do all of your connective stitching in the back. Once you've trimmed your ribbon, you're going to want to turn the raw edge under and stitch that down with very nice close width stitches. This will prevent any fraying in the future. The side bows are assembled in the same method, the only difference is that they don't have little tails. Now your bows are finished and they're ready to be attached to your bloomers.
If you want to add the heart pocket, make sure that you're cutting out 2 for every pocket that you want to make. These pockets are going to be stitched together and turned right side out to create a nice clean edge. Mark all around your pattern piece with some white chalk, or whatever color will show up best on your fabric. This will help your stitching lines be as close and even as possible. Next, put your fabric right sides together and pin your heart pocket in place, remembering that you're going to want to have about an inch wide gap so that you can turn your heart pocket inside out. Use the lines you made as a stitching guide and make sure that you go slowly and carefully so that it's as even as possible. This will really help with the overall look. Clip all of your corners and then turn it right sides out. After a good press, it'll have a much better shape. You're going to stitch it down as close to the edge as possible.
And now you've watched the full tutorial, and you should have a decent idea of how to put these together. If there's anything that's unclear to you or you run into any sort of problem, feel free to either let me know in the comments below or email me at mayagracesews@gmail.com. I'll have that in the description box below, and I would be more than happy to talk to you about the problem you've run into. Also, once you have your completed bloomers, I would love to see them. You can use hashtag MayaGraceSews on Instagram, or if you're not into social media, you can just email me. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed these bloomers as much as I'm enjoying wearing them, and I'll see y'all later. Bye! This right here is just the ideal vision of beauty. Am I even in shot? I don't know. I'm very tall. I might not be in shot. Oh my gosh, I'm like Shigo as an OG. My cat is judging me, it's fine.